September 21, 2012. A young Irish woman finishes a night out with colleagues in Melbourne, texts her husband, "I'm walking home now," and steps into the night. Within minutes, she's approached by a stranger in a blue hoodie who seems friendly enough to chat with. But those CCTV cameras capturing their conversation are recording the final moments of Jill Meagher's life. What happened next shocked Australia, devastated Ireland, and exposed a parole system so broken it allowed a serial rapist to walk free and kill again. This is the story that made 30,000 people march in the streets and changed how we think about women's safety forever. You're about to see how one woman's tragic death became a catalyst for change across 2 continents, how CCTV footage provided heartbreaking evidence of her final moments, and how a community's love for a stranger they'd never met forced governments to confront their failures. Stay with me because Jill Meagher's story proves that even in our darkest moments, humanity can find the strength to demand better and create lasting change in memory of those we've lost. Jill Meagher was living proof that dreams could come true if you had the courage to chase them. Born in Drogheda, Ireland in 1982, Jill grew up with the kind of adventurous spirit that wouldn't be contained by the familiar shores of her homeland. She was bright, ambitious, and determined to see what the world had to offer beyond the rolling green hills of County Louth. After completing her education, Jill made the bold decision that thousands of young Irish people make each year. She would try her luck in Australia. It wasn't just a working holiday for her. It was the beginning of what she hoped would be a new chapter in her life. Australia represented opportunity, adventure, and the chance to build something meaningful on the other side of the world. Melbourne became Jill's adopted home, and she embraced it with the enthusiasm of someone who truly appreciated the opportunity she'd been given. She found work with the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, ABC, as a radio producer, a job that utilized her intelligence and creativity while connecting her to the vibrant media landscape of her new country. Her colleagues at ABC Radio would later describe her as professional, friendly, and someone who brought a distinctly Irish warmth to their workplace. But perhaps most importantly, Jill found love. She met and married Tom Meagher, and together they built the kind of life that many young couples dream of. They had their own apartment in Brunswick, a trendy inner-city suburb of Melbourne known for its cafes, bars, and multicultural atmosphere. They were building careers they cared about, exploring their adopted city, and planning for a future that seemed bright with possibility. To those who knew her, Jill represented the best of what it meant to be young, hopeful, and willing to take risks for love and opportunity. She maintained strong connections with her family back in Ireland while fully embracing her new life in Australia. She was someone who proved that you could honor your roots while still growing new ones in foreign soil. September 21, 2012, began like countless Fridays before it. Jill finished her work week at ABC Radio and made plans to meet colleagues for drinks, the kind of casual after-work socializing that builds friendships and helps people unwind from the stresses of their jobs. It was exactly the kind of normal, healthy social activity that millions of people engage in every weekend without a second thought. The group met at several bars along Brunswick Street and Sydney Road, areas known for their vibrant nightlife and safe, well-lit streets. These weren't dangerous areas, they were the heart of Melbourne's young professional social scene, places where people felt comfortable and secure. Jill was with friends in familiar surroundings, doing exactly what she had done countless times before. As the evening progressed, the group moved between venues, enjoying each other's company and celebrating the end of another work week. Jill was in good spirits, relaxed and happy to be spending time with people she liked and trusted. There was nothing unusual about the evening, nothing that would have suggested it would be anything other than another pleasant night out with friends. Around 1:30 a.m., Jill decided it was time to head home. She said goodbye to her colleagues, stepped out into the crisp Melbourne night, and began what should have been a routine walk back to her apartment. The distance wasn't far, about 700 meters along Sydney Road, a well-lit main thoroughfare that she had walked many times before. Before leaving, Jill sent a text message to her husband Tom, who was at home waiting for her. "I'm walking home now." It was the kind of considerate message that loving couples send to each other, letting him know she was on her way and would be home soon. Tom would later say that receiving that text gave him comfort. He knew she was safe and would be with him within minutes. But Jill Meagher would never make it home. What Jill didn't know as she began her walk along Sydney Road was that she was being watched. Adrian Bayley, a 41-year-old serial sex offender who should have been in prison, was prowling the same streets looking for a victim. He had spotted Jill leaving the bar and decided to follow her. Bayley was not a stranger to violence against women. His criminal history stretched back years and included multiple convictions for rape and sexual assault. He was a dangerous predator who had repeatedly demonstrated that he posed a serious threat to community safety. And yet, due to failures in the parole system, he was walking the streets of Melbourne as a free man on the night he encountered Jill Meagher. The CCTV footage that would later become central to the investigation shows the chilling progression of events. Multiple cameras along Sydney Road captured Jill walking home, appearing relaxed and comfortable as she made her way through the familiar streets. The footage shows her as she was in life, a young woman simply trying to get home safely after a night out with friends. But the cameras also captured something else. Ms. Meagher was stalked for about 1 kilometer in the same part of Sydney Road by her murderer, Adrian Bayley. The footage shows Bayley following her, studying her movements, and planning his attack. For nearly a kilometer, Jill was unaware that a predator was stalking her every step. The final piece of CCTV footage is particularly haunting. It shows Jill walking past a boutique on Sydney Road when Bayley approaches her and strikes up what appears to be a casual conversation. To anyone watching, it might have looked like a chance encounter between strangers, perhaps someone asking for directions or making friendly small talk. But what the cameras couldn't capture was the sinister nature of Bayley's approach. He was using charm and the appearance of normalcy to get close to his victim, employing the same tactics that predators have used for generations to gain the trust of unsuspecting victims. What happened next was captured partially on CCTV but would only be fully understood after Bayley's eventual confession. After engaging Jill in conversation on Sydney Road, he managed to lure or force her into Hope Street, a nearby laneway that was darker and more isolated than the main thoroughfare. Bayley, who was a total stranger to Jill, dragged her into a laneway off Hope Street, where he raped and strangled her. The attack was brutal and calculated, carried out by someone who had done this before and knew how to control and overpower his victims. During the interrogation, Bayley ended up breaking down and admitting that he had strangled her with his hands in a lane off Hope Street, Brunswick. He had then buried her. The confession revealed the cold-blooded nature of the crime. After assaulting and murdering Jill, Bayley disposed of her body and attempted to cover up his crime. The randomness of the attack was perhaps what made it so terrifying to the broader community. Jill hadn't done anything wrong, hadn't taken unnecessary risks, hadn't put herself in danger. She was simply walking home from a night out with friends along a route she had taken many times before. The fact that such violence could happen to someone who was doing everything right challenged fundamental assumptions about safety and security. When Jill failed to return home, Tom Meagher knew immediately that something was wrong. This wasn't like his wife. She was reliable, considerate, and would never simply disappear without explanation. When she didn't respond to calls or texts, he contacted police to report her missing. The initial police response was unfortunately typical of how missing person cases are often handled in the first 24 hours. There was a tendency to assume that Jill might have simply stayed out longer than planned, perhaps sleeping off a night of drinking at a friend's place. But Tom knew his wife, and he was insistent that her disappearance was not voluntary. What transformed this from a routine missing person case into a major investigation was the emergence of the CCTV footage. Jill Meagher's CCTV, the security camera recording of Melbourne woman Jill Meagher's last minutes alive, registered more than 677,000 views. The footage provided a clear timeline of Jill's final movements and, crucially, showed her interaction with an unknown man in a blue hoodie. The power of social media transformed the search for Jill Meagher into something unprecedented in Australian criminal history. The CCTV footage was shared thousands of times across Facebook, Twitter, and other platforms. The hashtag Jill Meagher began trending as people across Australia and Ireland shared her story and appealed for information about her whereabouts. What emerged was a grassroots campaign that crossed national boundaries and demonstrated the power of collective action in the digital age. Irish communities in Australia organized search parties, while people in Ireland who had never met Jill shared her story and appealed for help finding her. The case became a symbol of the shared humanity that connects people across continents. The response to Jill's disappearance revealed something beautiful about human nature, the way strangers can come together to help someone they've never met. Thousands of people joined organized searches, plastered missing person posters across Melbourne, and used social media to spread awareness about her case. The Irish community in Melbourne was particularly active, organizing search parties and providing support to Tom during the most difficult period of his life. But the response went far beyond the Irish diaspora. Australians from all backgrounds joined the effort to find Jill, treating her disappearance as if she were their own sister, daughter, or friend. The case also highlighted the role that modern technology could play in criminal investigations. The CCTV footage not only provided crucial evidence but also allowed the public to become active participants in the search for answers. People studied the images, shared them widely, and provided tips to police based on what they had seen. The breakthrough in the case came when police were able to use the CCTV footage to identify and locate Adrian Bayley. The images of the man in the blue hoodie were clear enough that investigators could trace his movements and eventually determine his identity. He was arrested 5 days after she disappeared and her body was recovered later that night. The arrest came after intensive police work that combined traditional investigative techniques with analysis of the extensive CCTV footage from the night of Jill's disappearance. At around 10 p.m. on September 27th, Bayley led police to where he had buried Jill's body. The discovery confirmed what everyone had feared but hoped against, that Jill Meagher was dead, and that her death had been the result of a violent crime. The news of the discovery devastated not only Tom Meagher and Jill's family, but also the thousands of people who had become invested in the search for her. The collective hope that had sustained the search effort was replaced by collective grief as people struggled to process the senseless loss of a young woman who had simply been trying to get home safely. What made Jill's murder even more tragic was the revelation of Adrian Bayley's extensive criminal history. 2009, completed sex offender program prior to release on parole in 2010. August 12, 2011, King hitman in Geelong. He pleaded guilty to assault and was bailed pending appeal against sentence. September 22, 2012, while on parole he attacked Jill Meagher as she was walking home. The timeline revealed a pattern of escalating violence and a parole system that had failed catastrophically to protect the community. Bayley was a serial sex offender who had been given multiple opportunities to reform, but who had instead continued to pose a danger to innocent women. Bayley, a serial sex offender, was sentenced to life imprisonment in 2013. But the damage had already been done. His freedom had cost Jill Meagher her life and had robbed her family and friends of someone they loved dearly. The revelation of Bayley's history raised uncomfortable questions about the parole system and how decisions are made about releasing dangerous criminals back into the community. It highlighted the gap between rehabilitation programs and actual behavioral change, and the devastating consequences that can result when the system fails to accurately assess risk. The public response to Jill's murder was unprecedented in Australian history. A public march, organized by Melbourne photographer Philip Werner, took place on September 30, 2012, 2 days after the discovery and recovery of Meagher's body. Approximately 30,000 people walked along Sydney Road in her memory. The march was a powerful demonstration of collective grief and determination that something positive should come from such a senseless tragedy. It wasn't just about mourning Jill, it was about demanding changes to make the community safer for all women. The size and peaceful nature of the march made international headlines and demonstrated how a single tragedy could galvanize an entire community. People came from across Melbourne and beyond to participate, many carrying flowers and signs with messages of support for Jill's family. The march also served as a powerful reminder of the impact that one person's life can have on countless others. Most of the participants had never met Jill Meagher, but they felt connected to her story and compelled to honor her memory through collective action. Adrian Ernest Bayley was sentenced to life in prison with a 35-year non-parole period in Australia on June 20, 2013 for the rape and murder of Jill Meagher, 29. The sentence ensured that Bayley would likely spend the rest of his life in prison, never again having the opportunity to harm another woman. The trial revealed the full extent of Bayley's crimes and his complete lack of remorse for what he had done. He said his future had been taken away and replaced with a life of fear, insomnia, and anger. What was stolen from me on the 22nd of September 2012 was love, my best friend, and my entire world, Mr. Meagher said in his statement. He said his faith in mankind had been destroyed by the evil that had taken his wife from him. Tom Meagher's victim impact statement was a powerful testament to the devastating effect that violent crime has not only on its direct victims, but on everyone who loves them. His words captured the ripple effect of violence and the way that a single act of evil can destroy multiple lives. Jill's murder prompted significant changes to the parole system in Victoria and other Australian states. The case became a catalyst for reform, forcing governments to examine how they assess risk and make decisions about releasing dangerous criminals back into the community. The case led to a review of parole policies and procedures, with particular focus on how serial sex offenders are monitored and supervised. The reforms were designed to prevent future tragedies like Jill's murder by ensuring that dangerous criminals are not released prematurely or without adequate oversight. The incident prompted the installation of 9 security cameras in Sydney Road as a crime prevention measure. These practical improvements to community safety infrastructure were a direct result of lessons learned from Jill's case. Jill's murder resonated far beyond Australia's borders, particularly in Ireland, where she was remembered as one of their own who had been taken while pursuing her dreams abroad. The case highlighted the global nature of migration and the way that tragedies can unite people across continents. Irish media covered the case extensively, and the Irish government expressed condolences and support for the Meagher family. The case became a symbol of the risks that young people take when they leave home to build new lives in foreign countries, and the responsibility that host nations have to keep them safe. The international attention also helped to amplify calls for systemic change and ensured that the lessons learned from Jill's case would be shared with law enforcement and policymakers in other countries facing similar challenges. In the years since Jill's murder, her story has continued to inspire positive change and community action. Her name has become synonymous with the fight for women's safety and the importance of community solidarity in the face of tragedy. Tom Meagher has become an advocate for criminal justice reform and has worked to ensure that his wife's death serves as a catalyst for positive change rather than just another tragic statistic. His dignified response to unimaginable loss has inspired others and demonstrated the power of channeling grief into constructive action. The case also highlighted the importance of technology in modern criminal investigations and the role that community engagement can play in solving crimes. The combination of CCTV evidence and social media activism created a new model for how communities can support law enforcement and seek justice for victims. She was a young woman, simply going about engaging in ordinary activity, and died in that process. Retired Supreme Court Judge Frank Vincent. These words capture the fundamental injustice of what happened to Jill Meagher. She was doing nothing more than countless other young women do every weekend, and she paid for that ordinary activity with her life. But Jill's legacy extends far beyond the circumstances of her death. She is remembered as someone who embraced life, pursued her dreams with courage, and brought joy to the people who knew her. Her story has become a catalyst for positive change and a reminder of the importance of community solidarity. The fact that 30,000 strangers were moved to march in her memory speaks to something fundamental about human nature: our capacity for empathy, our ability to see ourselves in the stories of others, and our determination to create meaning from senseless tragedy. Jill Meagher's murder was a tragedy that should never have happened. A young woman with her whole life ahead of her was killed by a predator who should have been in prison, let down by a system that failed to protect her and countless others. But her story also demonstrates the power of community, the importance of never giving up hope, and the way that love can transcend even the darkest circumstances. The response to her death, from the grassroots search effort to the massive memorial march to the systemic reforms that followed, showed humanity at its best. Adrian Bayley will spend the rest of his life in prison where he belongs. The parole system has been reformed to better protect the community. CCTV cameras now help keep Sydney Road safer. And Jill Meagher's name continues to inspire people to work for a world where women can walk home safely. She was just trying to get home after a night out with friends. She should have made it safely back to the man who loved her, to continue building the life they had planned together. Instead, she became a symbol of both the worst and best of humanity, the senseless violence that can destroy innocent lives, and the collective response that can honor those lives and work to prevent future tragedies. Jill Meagher's walk home ended in tragedy, but her legacy continues in the safer communities, reformed systems, and countless lives that have been touched by her story. That may not bring her back, but it ensures that her death was not in vain and that her memory continues to make a difference in the world she was taken from far too soon.